Let's start this off by looking at the world as if it were a giant pie chart. Imagine for a second that you took the entire population of planet Earth, all 8 billion of us, and tried to slice us up into demographic groups. You'd have massive slices for China, for India, for the Christian world, the Islamic world. But if you kept slicing, looking for the Jewish population, you would have to squint. You'd barely be able to see it. We are talking about roughly 15 to 16 million people. In a world of billions, that is 0.2%. That is statistically a rounding error. If the human population was a stadium of 50,000 people, the Jewish section would be about 100 people sitting quietly in one corner of the upper deck. Now, keep that image in your head, those 100 people in the stadium. Because if you walked out of that stadium and walked into the halls of the most prestigious universities, or opened the pages of the Forbes billionaires list, or looked at the roster of Nobel Prize winners, something bizarre happens. That tiny group of 100 people, suddenly, they are everywhere. This isn't an exaggeration. It is a statistical anomaly that drives sociologists crazy. Let's look at the Nobel Prize, the highest honor purely for intellect and contribution to humanity. Since it started, over 20% of all Nobel Prizes have gone to Jewish recipients. Think about the math on that. A group that is 0.2% of the population is winning 20% of the top awards. That is a statistical overrepresentation of 100 to 1. And it's not just science. Look at wealth. If you look at the US specifically, where the population is barely 2% Jewish, nearly half of the billionaires historically have had Jewish heritage. Look at the founders of Google, Facebook, Dell, Oracle, Bloomberg. So we have to ask the question, the uncomfortable question, the question that people whisper at dinner parties but are afraid to ask out loud because they don't want to sound prejudiced. How does such a tiny, often persecuted minority achieve such a massive, disproportionate amount of influence and capital? Is it nature? Is it DNA? Or is there something else going on here? Now, we have to address the elephant in the room immediately. Because the moment you bring up these statistics, the internet goes wild. You've seen the comments. You've heard the theories. People love a good conspiracy. It's comforting, isn't it? It's easier to believe that they control the banks, or they have a secret society, or they pull the strings from a shadowy room in Switzerland. It comforts people because it gives them an excuse for why they aren't successful. Oh, I'm not rich because I'm not part of the club. But here is the cold, hard reality. That is total nonsense. There is no secret handshake. There is no Illuminati meeting on Tuesdays where they hand out checks to anyone with a specific last name. If you think the secret to this success is some nefarious plot, you are going to be very disappointed. But if you are smart, you should be very excited. Why? Because if it's not a secret society, and if it's not magic, then it must be a system. It's not about luck. Luck is winning the lottery once. Luck is catching a good break in the stock market one year, but when you see a pattern repeat itself over centuries, across different continents, through different languages, and despite massive attempts to destroy the people holding that pattern, that is not luck. That is a strategy. It's not genetic either. There is no money gene. You don't take a blood test and find out you're destined to be a CEO. What we are looking at is a cultural operating system. Just like a computer runs on Windows or Mac OS, this group of people has been running on a very specific, very old, and very effective operating system for about 3,000 years. And the best thing about an operating system, you can download it, you can install it on your own hard drive. The reason most people never achieve this level of wealth is that they are running on a glitchy, modern operating system that teaches them to consume, to envy, and to seek instant gratification. Meanwhile, this 0.2% has been playing the long game, using a set of principles that virtually guarantee success if you follow them. So, what is this operating system? I like to call it the code. Imagine you are playing a video game. Most people are running around trying to figure out the controls, bumping into walls, trying to survive level 1. But then you have a player who has the strategy guide. They know where the hidden items are. They know how to level up faster. They know that if you do X, Y happens. Jewish culture, through religious texts like the Torah and the Talmud, and through cultural trauma and survival instincts, developed a strategy guide for life. It's a guide that prioritizes things that seem boring to the rest of the world until they see the payoff. While the rest of the world was prioritizing land and castles, this code prioritized books and literacy. While the rest of the world glorified spending and displaying wealth, this code prioritized saving and reinvesting. While the rest of the world tried to go it alone, this code built unbreakable community safety nets. In this video, we aren't just going to look at the rich guys in suits. We are going to tear apart this code. We are going to look at the specific rules regarding money, education, and charity that act as a magnet for wealth. And I promise you, by the end of this, you're going to realize that the secret was never hidden. It was just written in a language of discipline that most people aren't willing to learn. We are going to explore how being banned from owning land created the world's best bankers. We're going to look at how a specific style of arguing creates genius-level critical thinking, and we're going to look at the community chest concept that acts like an unending stream of venture capital. The 0.2% rule isn't about them. It's about what you can learn from them. Hey, real quick, we are about to dive into history and money secrets that schools literally don't teach you. If you want to upgrade your own mental software, do yourself a favor and follow the channel right now. You don't want to miss the breakdown that's coming up. To really understand why the Jewish community became so financially dominant, we have to hop in a time machine and go back to medieval Europe. We need to look at the feudal system. Now, in today's world, if you want to be rich, you start a tech company, you buy stocks, or you become a famous entertainer. But back then, there was only one real asset: dirt, soil, land. If you owned land, you were a lord. You had power, you had food, you had generational wealth. If you didn't own land, you were a serf, basically a slave to the soil, working until you died. Here is where the history gets dark but fascinating. In many Christian kingdoms across Europe, laws were passed that specifically forbade Jewish people from owning land. Imagine that. You are living in an agricultural society where 90% of the economy is farming, and the government looks at you and says, "You are legally not allowed to participate in this economy." It was meant to be a punishment. It was meant to keep them poor and subservient. But here is the law of unintended consequences in full effect. Because they couldn't be farmers, they were forced off the fields and into the towns and cities, while the rest of the population was stuck in the mud, literally, focusing on harvest cycles and weather. The Jewish community was forced to adapt to an urban lifestyle. They had to find other ways to survive. So what do? You become a merchant. You become a trader. You become a craftsman. You learn to buy grain from the farmer and sell it to the baker. You learn the art of the deal. This ban on land, which was supposed to destroy them, actually gave them a 500-year head start on capitalism. While the rest of the world was playing Farmville, the Jewish community was playing Monopoly. They became the first true middle class, the first true commercial class, masters of trade and logistics, simply because they had no other choice. Now let's talk about the banking sector. You always hear the stereotype, Jewish bankers. But do you know why that happened? It wasn't because they had a genetic love for gold coins. It was because of a religious loophole. In medieval Europe, the Catholic Church had a strict rule against usury. Usury basically means charging interest on a loan. The Church said that money should not breed money. It was considered a sin against God. So, if you were a Christian, you could lend money to your neighbor, but you couldn't charge him a single penny of interest. Well, as you can imagine, that makes for a terrible business model. Nobody wanted to lend money if there was no profit in it. but the economy needed credit. Kings needed money to fight wars. Merchants needed money to buy ships. Farmers needed money to buy seeds. The economy was stalling because the flow of capital was frozen by religious law. Enter the Jewish community. See, Jewish law also forbids charging interest, but only to other Jews. The Torah says you cannot charge interest to your brother, but you can charge interest to a stranger. Suddenly, you had a perfect economic match. The Christians needed loans but were forbidden from being bankers. The Jews needed a profession since they couldn't own farms and were religiously allowed to act as bankers for the Christians. They stepped into the void. They became the liquidity providers for the entire continent. But don't think this was an easy gig. It was incredibly dangerous. They were the sin eaters of the economy. The kings would borrow massive amounts of money from Jewish lenders to fund their crusades or their castle renovations. But when the bill came due, often, instead of paying the debt, the king would just stir up hatred against the Jews, call them greedy, and kick them out of the country. Debt cancelled. This high-risk environment forced them to become incredibly sharp. They had to learn risk management. They had to understand collateral. They had to learn how to move money across borders without it getting stolen. They developed the concept of letters of credit, the grandfather of the modern check, so they wouldn't have to carry gold on the roads where bandits were waiting. They invented modern finance out of sheer survival necessity. This brings us to the third and perhaps most profound concept: portable wealth. Imagine living your life with a bag packed by the door. For centuries, Jewish people lived with the constant threat of expulsion. A king could wake up on the wrong side of the bed and sign a decree saying, "All Jews must leave the country within 48 hours." This happened in England in 1290, in Spain in 1492. In France, multiple times. If you own a mansion, you can't take it with you. If you own 1,000 acres of farmland, you leave it behind. If your wealth is in heavy furniture or livestock, it's gone. So, the culture adapted again. They began to prioritize wealth that was high in value but low in weight. This is why, historically, you see such a strong presence of Jewish families in the diamond and jewelry trade. You can sew $1 million worth of diamonds into the hem of your coat and walk across a border. You can swallow a gemstone if you have to. It's wealth that moves with you. But the ultimate form of portable wealth isn't diamonds. It's what's in your head. This is the root of the obsession with education and professions like medicine, law, and accounting. If you are a doctor and you get kicked out of Germany and land in America, you are still a doctor. You still have your knowledge. The Nazis could take the house. They could take the bank account. They could take the art off the walls. But they could not extract the education from the brain. This created a cultural value system where material things are seen as temporary, but skills and credentials are seen as permanent. You invest in the things that no tyrant can confiscate. So when you see that statistic about the 0.2% winning 20% of the Nobel Prizes, understand that it comes from a deep historical trauma that taught a very specific lesson. Your mind is the only bank vault that no one can crack. This is a heavy concept to think about. But I want to ask you guys a question to get the gears turning. If you had exactly 1 hour to leave your country forever, and you could only take what you could carry in your hands and in your head, what would your net worth actually be? Would you be broke, or are your skills your real wealth? Let me know in the comments. I really want to read your answers on this one. We've talked about the land bans and the banking history. But there is a deeper layer to this cultural operating system that started way before medieval Europe. It goes back thousands of years. In the ancient world and the Middle Ages, literacy was a luxury. It was a superpower reserved for a tiny elite. Kings often couldn't read. Knights couldn't write their own names. The average person was completely illiterate, relying on priests or town criers to tell them what was happening in the world. Knowledge was gated. If you couldn't read, you couldn't check the contract. You couldn't verify the tax ledger. You were flying blind. But in the Jewish tradition, things were different. Radical, actually. There was a religious law that required every father to teach his son to read the Torah. It wasn't a choice, it was a divine commandment. By the age of 13, the bar mitzvah age, a Jewish boy had to be able to stand up in front of the entire community and read from a scroll written in ancient Hebrew. Think about the economic implication of that. While 95% of the European population was illiterate, you had this one small group of people where nearly 100% of the men, and often the women, which was unheard of, could read and write. This meant they held the keys to information. While a farmer might get cheated because he couldn't read the weight scale report, a Jewish merchant could read the fine print. They could write letters to cousins in other countries to ask about market prices. Hey, is wheat selling for more in Italy than in France? They built an information highway in a world that was disconnected. This literacy gap is one of the single biggest reasons for the initial accumulation of wealth. It wasn't magic, it was access to data. In the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. In a world of the illiterate, the reader is the CEO. But reading is only step one. It's how they read that matters. If you go to a standard Western school, the teacher stands at the front and says, 2 + 2 = 4. Memorize it. Don't ask questions. You sit there, you absorb, you repeat. The traditional Jewish education system, centered around the study of the Talmud, is the exact opposite. It is loud, it is chaotic, and it is brilliant. It involves a study partner called a havruta. You don't sit quietly. You read a line of law and then you attack it. You debate it. You scream at each other, not out of anger, but out of passion for the logic. Why does the law say this? What if the cow falls into the pit on a Tuesday instead of a Saturday? What if the owner wasn't home? This method of hair-splitting logic and intense debate is called pilpul. It trains the brain to look for loopholes, to anticipate counter-arguments, and to view a problem from 360 degrees. Have you ever heard the joke, 2 Jews, 3 opinions? It's funny, but it highlights this cultural trait. Disagreement isn't disrespectful, it's a sign of engagement. Now, take that brain training and drop it into the modern business world. What do you get? You get the world's best lawyers. You get brilliant strategists who can see the flaw in a business plan before it launches. You get negotiators who can run circles around the other side of the table because they've been debating complex legal theory since they were 7 years old. While other kids were learning to sit still and be quiet, these kids were learning how to dismantle an argument. That is a skill that pays millions in the adult world. This brings us to the financial prioritization of education. In many households, college tuition or private school fees are seen as a burden. A massive bill that you dread paying. Oh man, this is costing me a fortune. In the Jewish code, education is not an expense. It is the primary investment vehicle. It is more important than a nice car, a big house, or fancy clothes. There is a story of a famous rabbi who said, if you have to choose between buying food and paying the teacher, pay the teacher. You can fast for a day, but you cannot be ignorant for a day. You will see families living in modest apartments, driving beat-up cars, wearing simple clothes, but their kids are in the best schools money can buy. They pour resources into the brain. Why? Because they understand compound interest applies to knowledge too. If you give a kid $1 million, he might blow it on Ferraris and parties. By the time he's 30, he's broke. We see this with lottery winners all the time. But if you spend $1 million giving that kid the best education, the best tutors, the best environment, he will likely go out and make 10 million. The wealth is generated by the person, not given to the person. This long-term view shifts the focus. The goal isn't to leave your kids a big inheritance check. The goal is to turn your kids into machines that can generate their own wealth. And that is a subtle but massive difference in mindset. Be honest with me here. I want to know about your own habits. Since you left school, how many books have you read this year? Or did you stop studying once you got the diploma? Drop a number in the comments below. 0 is an honest answer too. Let's see where we stand. We love the story of the self-made man in America, the guy who started in a garage with nothing, ate ramen noodles for 5 years, and became a billionaire entirely on his own. It's a great movie script. But in reality, it's almost never true. Behind almost every success story, there is capital. Someone wrote a check. Someone gave a loan. For most people, if you have a brilliant business idea but you're broke, you have to go to a bank. And the bank is going to look at your credit score, ask for collateral you don't have, and if they do lend you money, they are going to charge you 10%, 15%, 20% interest. That interest eats your profit margin alive. It kills businesses before they even start. The Jewish community solved this problem centuries ago with a concept called the Gemach. It stands for Gemilut Chasadim, which means acts of loving kindness. But functionally, it is a shadow banking system. It is an interest-free loan society. Imagine you want to start a bakery. You don't go to Chase or Bank of America. You go to the local Gemach. Wealthy members of the community deposit money there, not to make a profit, but to help the community grow. You borrow $50,000 to buy your ovens. You pay back exactly $50,000. No interest, no fees. This allows the money to circulate within the community with zero friction. It lowers the barrier to entry for entrepreneurs. While the guy down the street is drowning in debt service payments, the Jewish business owner is reinvesting every dollar of profit back into the business because his cost of capital is zero. It's an economic cheat code. It turns the community into its own venture capital firm. Now you might be thinking, wait, if they lend money without interest, what stops people from taking the money and running? That brings us to the concept of vertical trust. In the standard economy, we rely on legal contracts. We sign 50-page documents so that if you screw me over, I can sue you. It's expensive, it's slow, and it implies that we don't trust each other. In tight-knit Jewish communities, and specifically in industries dominated by them, like the Diamond District in New York or Antwerp, business is done differently. Millions of dollars change hands on a handshake and a phrase. Mazal ubracha, luck and blessing. Why does this work? Because of social collateral. If you borrow money from the Gemach and you don't pay it back, you aren't just hurting a faceless bank. You are stealing from your neighbor. You are stealing from the guy you pray with. If you default, you don't just lose points on a credit score. You lose your reputation. You become a pariah. Nobody will buy from you, nobody will sell to you, nobody will marry your children. The social cost of being dishonest is infinitely higher than the financial gain of stealing the money. This high-trust environment reduces transaction costs. Deals happen instantly. While two corporate lawyers are fighting over a contract clause for 3 weeks, these guys have already bought the inventory, sold it, and reinvested the profit. Speed is wealth. And trust creates speed. Finally, let's talk about networking. Everyone knows it's not what you know, it's who you know. People pay thousands of dollars to join mastermind groups or country clubs just to rub shoulders with successful people. The Jewish code has a built-in mandatory networking event that happens not once a month but twice a day. It's called the minyan. According to religious law, communal prayer cannot happen unless there are at least 10 men present. This forces you out of your house. You cannot be a hermit and be a good Jew. You have to show up at the synagogue and look who is in the room. You have the billionaire real estate tycoon standing next to the struggling teacher, standing next to the plumber, standing next to the lawyer, all equal before God, all in the same room. Before and after the prayers, people talk, schmoozing. How's business? Actually, I'm looking for a new accountant. Oh, really? My nephew just opened a firm. Here's his number. It is the original LinkedIn, but it's face-to-face and highly effective. Information flows freely. Job opportunities, stock tips, real estate deals. They circulate in the lobby of the synagogue before they ever hit the open market. By the time a job is posted on Indeed.com, it's already been filled by someone's cousin who heard about it at the minyan. It creates an insider network that supports its own. Let's get real about your circle. Do you have friends who would lend you money to start a business, interest-free, on a handshake? Or are you fighting this battle solo? Type circle or solo in the comments. I have a feeling I know what most of you will say. Let's talk about the voice in your head. For a lot of people, especially if you grew up in a traditional Christian or even secular Western household, there is a subtle script running in the background. It says things like, money is the root of all evil. Rich people are greedy. It is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter heaven. Whether you realize it or not, this creates a subconscious blockage. If your brain thinks money is bad or dirty, it will self-sabotage every time you get close to success. You will feel guilty. You will get rid of it. The Jewish code flips this script entirely. In this tradition, poverty is not seen as a virtue. It is not holy to be poor. In fact, poverty is often viewed as a state that prevents you from doing God's work. How can you help the widow? How can you feed the orphan? How can you build a hospital? You can't do any of that with good intentions alone. You need a checkbook. Money, in the Jewish view, is completely neutral. It is energy. It is a tool. Think of money like a hammer. If you give a hammer to a murderer, he kills someone. If you give a hammer to a carpenter, he builds a shelter for the homeless. The hammer is innocent. The hammer doesn't have a soul, you do. Because of this perspective, Jewish culture doesn't have the same hang-ups or guilt about ambition. A rabbi can be wealthy. A leader should be successful. When you remove the guilt, you remove the brakes. You are free to pursue success aggressively because you view that success as the fuel for doing good in the world. Now here is the counterintuitive part. The part that makes zero mathematical sense, but 100% psychological sense. If you want to receive more, you have to give more. There is a concept called tzedakah. We translate it as charity, but the Hebrew root actually comes from the word justice or righteousness. Giving money isn't just a nice thing you do when you feel generous. It is a mandatory obligation to balance the scales of the world. The rule is generally 10% of your income. This is the tithe. Now you're sitting there thinking, I'm trying to get rich. Why would I give away 10% of my money? Two reasons. First, the psychology of abundance. When you write a check to charity, you are sending a powerful signal to your own brain. I have more than enough. I am a provider. I am overflowing. This destroys the scarcity mindset, that fear that keeps you small, hoarding pennies. It forces you to operate from a place of power. Second, it's the ultimate networking key. Philanthropy is the playground of the elite. When you become a donor, you aren't just helping a cause, you are entering a room. You are sitting on boards with other successful people. You are building social capital. In the Jewish community, the biggest donors are the most respected leaders. Not the guys with the biggest yachts, but the guys with the biggest names on the hospital wings. Status is tied to generosity, not just accumulation. This incentivizes the rich to circulate their money back into the system, which keeps the entire economy of the community healthy. So, you've made the money. You don't feel guilty about it. You're giving some away. Now, how do you keep it? There is a stereotype that Jewish people are good with money, but people often confuse making money with gambling. They think it's about high-risk bets on the stock market. The reality is the opposite. The code preaches extreme prudence. It's about defense. There is a piece of advice in the Talmud that is nearly 2,000 years old. It suggests how a man should divide his wealth. Let a man divide his money into 3 parts, 1/3 in land, 1/3 in business, merchandise, and 1/3 ready to hand, cash. This is literally modern asset allocation. real estate, land, equities, business, merchandise, and liquidity, cash. They were teaching diversification while the Roman Empire was still a thing. Why this obsession with safety? Because of the le d'or vidor mindset, which means from generation to generation. A typical Westerner tries to get rich for his life. He wants the Lamborghini now. He wants the vacation now. The Jewish mindset is, I am building this so my grandchildren don't have to start from zero. When you are planning for your grandkids, you don't take stupid risks. You don't bet the farm on a crypto coin. You buy assets that appreciate slowly and steadily. You protect the downside. This is why you see so many Jewish families in real estate. It's boring, it's slow, but it's permanent. You can pass a building down for 100 years. You can't pass down a flashy lifestyle. This is a controversial one, so I want you to be real with me in the comments. Do you believe money is the root of all evil? Or do you believe it's a tool for good? Be careful how you answer. Your answer might be the reason you are or aren't wealthy right now. Let's argue in the comments. We have covered a lot of ground today. We've looked at the medieval bans on land, the religious laws about interest, the survival tactics of portable wealth, and the intense focus on education. But there is one trap I don't want you to fall into. Do not make the mistake of thinking this success is genetic. Do not think it is biological. If you think, oh, they are just born smart, or they are just born good with money, you are missing the entire point of this video. And worse, you are letting yourself off the hook. The Jewish advantage isn't in the blood, it is in the behavior, it is in the culture. It is a set of habits, values, and priorities that are drilled into children from the moment they can walk. Proof? Look at other demographic groups that follow similar principles. Look at Asian American communities. Look at Nigerian immigrants in the UK. Look at Indian tech CEOs. What do these groups have in common? They prioritize education above leisure. They have tight-knit family structures. They pool resources within their community. They focus on STEM and hard skills. And guess what? The statistics show they skyrocket to the top of the income brackets, just like the Jewish community. The universe is not prejudiced. The market is not prejudiced. The market rewards specific inputs with specific outputs. If you input hard work, high education, risk management, and community cooperation, the market will output wealth. It doesn't care what your last name is. It cares about your code. So, how do you use this? How do you, sitting there watching this video, apply the 0.2% rule to your life starting today? You have to treat this like a software update for your brain. You are currently running Standard Operating System v1.0. It's the OS that tells you to buy things you can't afford to impress people you don't like. It tells you to watch Netflix instead of reading a book. It tells you to go into debt for a depreciating car. You need to uninstall that. You need to install the 0.2% OS. This means you stop looking at expenses and start looking at investments. It means you stop trying to do everything alone and start building a minyan, a circle of 10 people you trust with your life and your wallet. It means you stop fearing debate and start inviting criticism so you can sharpen your ideas. It means you stop seeing money as the goal and start seeing it as a tool to build a legacy. You don't have to convert to a religion to convert to a mindset. You just have to be humble enough to admit that maybe, just maybe, a culture that has survived and thrived for 3,000 years knows something you don't. The 0.2% rule isn't there to make you feel small. It isn't there to make you envious. It is there to show you what is possible when you focus. Most people live their lives by accident. They drift, they take whatever job is offered, they spend whatever is in the bank, and they hope for the best. The principles we discussed today are about living by design. The Jewish community didn't survive by accident. They survived because they designed a life raft of education and community that could float in any storm. They designed a financial system that could withstand any crash. You have the same power. You can decide right now that you are going to be the founding father or founding mother of your own dynasty. You can be the one who changes the trajectory of your family name forever. You can be the one who prioritizes skills over stuff. The blueprint is right in front of you. The code has been cracked. The only question left is, are you going to just watch the video, or are you going to run the code? Listen, if you made it this far, you are already different from 99% of the people who clicked away in the first minute. You have the attention span to learn. That's step one. If you found value in this breakdown, please destroy that like button. It helps the algorithm find more people who are ready to wake up. And I have a challenge for you. Comment, "I am the zero." 2% below if you are committed to building real generational wealth. I want to see how many future millionaires we have in this community. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss a video from Solomon's Treasury. We don't do fluff here, we do blueprints for power. I'll see you in the next one.